Yes, this is Dan Davidson with the Illinois Soybean Association, and joining us today for our webinar is Jim Nelson, who's the Yield Challenge Coordinator for ISA, and Gary Baumhart with BASF, who was a team captain in 2010 and had some experiences with running the Yield Challenge along with Jim back last year. We want to welcome you for attending the webinar today. Just so you know that you probably each have a dashboard. You can submit questions, and we can answer them as you submit them. So welcome here. We're going to spend some time talking about the Yield Challenge. Just with our quick objectives here, by attending this 1-hour webinar, we're going to try to do a couple of things. We want to make sure that all the participants know more about the program's requirements, what is its mission and objectives, how do you get involved in the program, tips on how to get the most out of your experience, and some incentives and awards that we give out for participating. So we want to give you a good snapshot. I know most of you have heard about the Yield Challenge, have been already recruited, but we want to make sure you have all the tools and the knowledge to implement this and execute it so it's successful for both you as well as ourselves, and mostly for Illinois soybean growers. So this to take off here, Jim, you've been involved in the Yield Challenge for some time. Talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish.
Yes, well, we've been looking at soybean yields, and some people are using the term plateau, and we know that a lot of farmers are frustrated with the yield increases in soybeans. So our mission is really to open up that box and try to see how we can discover new ways to improve those yields. We're doing that by doing some on-farm side-by-side testing, and the real intent here is to not only expose new ideas, but also to capture data and share that with other Illinois soybean growers.
Okay, well, thank you, Jim. So, I mean, our mission here, it kind of came very clear to me in my short time at ISA. It's just discovering ways to increase soybean yield. Lots of people out there across the U.S. doing some interesting things, and we want growers to be creative and work with their agronomists and company people and discover some new ways to increase yield, because at the end of the day, Illinois soybeans farmers can benefit from this. But I do want to make one point clear that this is not just a general yield contest, but it's more about a yield gain contest. So we're looking to see how we can increase yield. It's not to just throw the kitchen sink and spend $1,000 an acre to maximize yield. It's more looking at more techniques and practice and technologies, things that are probably economical that growers can use and adopt to maybe increase their bean yields 2, 5, or maybe even 10 bushels an acre. So it's a yield gain contest, not a strict yield contest. And one last point is, while we really want to promote this as a way for growers to discover new ways to improve their yields, there's also a research focus to this. The University of Illinois is going to take this information, the yield data, some other information about production practices, and analyze the data and look for some relationships between some of the treatments and the environment and why some of these technologies are working so well. So there is a small research focus that is parallel to just the yield discovery. Let's talk about, Jim, talk about a little bit about the history of the Yield Challenge, how it came to be, and how that idea all started.
Well, a number of years ago, it's probably been about 3 years in the incubation, we have some people got together and said, we really know that farmers are frustrated. What can we do to increase yields? And the word contest did come up early, but we wanted this to be a lot more than a contest, so the name was changed to a challenge because it really does focus on innovative ideas, on discovery, on capturing those ideas and returning that information back to farmers. So while we do have competition involved, it's really focused a lot deeper than that with a lot more meat in it. We introduced this program finally in 2009 for the 2010 season, and we ended up using a lot of different press and media advances on it, made a lot of calls on it, and people began to see the vision of it, and we ended up with a number of ag suppliers that said they would be glad to help support us in this. And as it grew, we had more and more join us. So we had a number of different sponsors last year. And as you can see from the slide, we had a lot of farmers engage in this. Now, we did have some difficulties with weather and some other learning curves, and so we didn't have the completion of all of those farmers, but we really ended up with a lot of different plots, over 120 different plots with side-by-sides, which gives us about 240 different data points, and a number of different teams that finished the protocol and were eligible for awards. So we began our second year with a lot of momentum in that.
That's very good, a lot of momentum. Jim, now after some initial work, now you've done a lot of promotion of this over the winter. We're looking at maybe, that 233 farmers that started started the project in 2010. We're looking at in this year maybe 500 or 600, right?
That's true. We already have indications of maybe over 60 teams, and a lot of the teams are going to be more people engaged in the team. So yes, it's very easy to interpolate that we may have over 500 farmers that would engage this year.
And a lot of different things being tested, a lot of different ideas, creative ideas, and boy, at the end of the year, if we get an 80% success rate, there'll be a lot of things we can share with Illinois soybean producers to help them improve their production and pick up another 2 to 10 bushels an acre.
That was the history last year, yes.
So what did, Jim, after you guys concluded, after you finished up the 2010 year, what are kind of some of the big picture things you learned from the 2010 yield challenge?
Well, whenever you engage in a large program like this, you're always wondering if you're really going to move the needle or are you just going to have a lot of fun. So we ended up with a lot of things that we could report back. First of all, farmers are very engaged in wanting higher yields, and they can do things to affect those soybean yields. We saw that from the data results. We found out that our farmers were already engaged in higher yielding plots, and then they also moved the needle beyond that. We also saw a lot of interest from our sponsors, corporate sponsors, and farmers that wanted to jump onto this program. And yet we still see a lot of room that we can improve. It was a learning year for us last year, and the learning curve was pretty steep. So there was a lot of things that we can bring to the program this year that will be improvements over last year.
I think you would agree there's a lot of enthusiasm out in the marketplace for the yield challenge amongst companies, amongst growers.
Yes, we see that just by the fact that we do see significant growth here for next year. Some of the companies that we've engaged with are looking at putting out more teams, covering more parts of the state.
Let's talk about a little bit about the organization and teams. Jim, how is that set up?
Well, we wanted to make this fair for people, especially in the area of awards, but also so they could focus on their areas of interest in the state. So we have tried to work with districts, and we're using the crop reporting districts that NASS uses in their crop reporting. Part of the reason is that helps us to distinguish north from south and some of the areas that have different soil types in the state of Illinois. So there's 9 crop reporting districts, and we have a little bit of competition going within a district on different teams. That way, we thought that was a lot more fair than having a statewide competition, because what happens in Alexander County is an awful lot different than what happens in McLean County, and we just want to entice people to be able to look at their own local area and find a way that they can also have a little bit of fun competing in those areas. Anybody that's an Illinois soybean grower is eligible. This is a state of Illinois program, so we're not crossing the border with it, and we are looking at a couple of different ways to engage people. Most of it has been done through what we call the teams, and a team is anywhere from 5 to 10 farmers who have an organization where we have a team leader of some sort. We call him a captain, and that allows us to pull data in a little bit more consistently, and it also gives sponsors a good way to get engaged in this. We also have an accommodation for individual farmers, and that's something that we can discuss with anybody that doesn't think that they can connect with a team very well. So did I answer your questions, Dan, or do you want me to?
And then of course we could have that you talk about the FFA and colleges. They can also sponsor teams.
That's right, and we have a cost that we're asking people to share with us, and usually the sponsors will pick up that cost, so the farmer has no input into that. But in cases of FFAs and colleges, we wanted to get young people engaged in this, and there's no cost. So if you are close to or connected with alumni on an FFA or colleges, we'd certainly like you to think about how you can encourage those people to engage with us as well.
So the graphic over here on the right that has all the little icons, that shows the distribution of sites last year?
That's correct. And if you look at that, you'll notice that we had a little weakness in the southern part of the state. We've already have, in fact, Gary just yesterday told me he's got a team organized in what we would call District 8, which is over in the southwest corner of the state. Southeast corner, I already have a team that's being formed there. We'd like several teams in that area, so there's a lot of room for more additional teams. Northern Illinois, we had some good participation in northeastern, but northwestern was a little light. We also have new teams being developed there. Western Illinois has an area, I think they were hit with weather conditions as much as anything, where we have a blank spot. I think the state's going to look a lot more included as we go into 2011, and that'll give us a lot more local information for people as well. And I might say that there were a few more, if you were engaged last year and you say, I don't see my icon in there, there were a few more spots that because of GPS locations and so on, the computer didn't pick them up and slap them in there. But we had a total of about 120 different locations in the state.
Okay, let's talk about the protocol a little bit, Jim. How the protocol is set up, how simple it is.
Well, our intent here is really to find out how some practice or number of practices, maybe even a system, will affect yield. In order to do that, we're looking at side-by-side, where you do normally what you would want to do in your field, and then what would you do to increase that yield? Again, it may be a single practice, it may be a multiple number of things, or even throwing the kitchen sink at it. So we don't have a restriction on what you do, except we do want you to use the same variety in both of your plots, because this is not a variety test, and we also have other ways to do that, such as the BIPS program, and a lot of the genetic companies are doing their own variety testing and so on. So that takes one variable out of it if we have the same variety, and then we can start to focus on what practices made a difference. And we're looking at something that's kind of real world here. We'd like a minimum of 2 acres in each one of these plots, and it'd be nice if these plots are side by side, because what we're really trying to achieve here is similar conditions in your field. We don't want different sides of the field where one side's a sand hill and the other side's a bottomland or something, which is obvious. Most people understand that, and they're doing a good job of trying to locate things that they will get good data off of. So we do want some records on this, starting with, we'll do some of that for you. If you'll send in soil samples, we'll start a database that tells us a lot about the nutritional background, and from there we ask the normal things. What did you plant here, and some of the data on that, and then what kind of applications were made. Some scouting information is really helpful, and at the end we want some very good harvest, and that means we would like to say probably, we definitely for award verify that harvest.
We're talking about, I mean, when the certified yield, how that has to be measured, what third party has to be involved so that so it's legitimate third party, that we know it's real data.
Yeah, I know a lot of you farmers are out there, you will end up using things like Combine Monitor, but our problem with that is that we can't compare different locations because every monitor is calibrated a little different. So what we do require is a weight, and that can either be a weigh wagon that's well calibrated, or it can be a weight over an elevator scale, a truck scale. And the reason for a third-party verifier, again, is partly for the awards and partly just to make sure that we get good data in there. And we're looking at a number of different people can do that. Of course, a CCA, extension advisor, someone that doesn't really have an interest in putting their thumb on the scale, you might say, but someone that can verify that, yep, we were there and we know it was harvested correctly.
Yeah, from working as with teams last year, and the protocols, how did you feel they worked? Were there some things that went well and things that didn't go well?
I think most of it worked pretty well. Gary, what kind of experience did you have?
I'm soon getting an echo now. I don't have any. I'm hearing a response back in my phone. Mike, can you hear me okay?
We're getting a reverberation on your phone, hearing you twice.
I turned off the voice portion, so I don't know what's causing that now.
So just kind of share with us your what your experiences were, Gary, with the protocol last year.
Well, I'll try to if you can hear me, but the one thing that was attractive to farmers was that they could just plant. They were so hold up during planting. Some of the treatments and the protocol for somebody to soil applied, that can be done well ahead when they're not busy planting. And then the post things, the time aspect of that for the farmers fit him very well as well. So that worked out very well. The one variety really made it simple on the planting. The other part of it that I've seen, the protocol, that data entry, I think that was a hang-up. I think that data entry, who was going to do it. I think some people thought maybe the farmers were going to do it, and some farmers did do it. But if having that established ahead of time, who's going to enter the data, is a real important part. And I ended up kind of picking that up for a lot of the groups that I work with, and picked up that data entry, and that was a big thing.
Okay. So we try to have a very simple protocol here. We don't want to make it too complex. We don't want it to become too much of a burden for people to implement. Just really talking about having a kind of a conventional treatment, whatever the farmer's regular practices are, and some other additional treatment. That treatment could be one item. It could be 3 or 4 items stacked together. It's just up to the farmer, the team member, and the captain to decide what they want to do. So we try to leave it pretty flexible and not too hard to do. We're going to move on to our next slide.
Is that I think it's real important to design the fields, because we lost a couple of our fields at harvest time due to the farmer not operating the combine himself, and maybe he had a hired person or a relative with the combine, and then not really making them aware of where the area was. And before we knew it, the plot was destroyed, harvested across the field being obtained. So a sign out there that stays up until the day of harvest, I think, is real important.
That's a very good point. When it comes to putting out plots on farmers' fields, sometimes in the heat of battle at harvest, sometimes harvesting plots become a lower priority relative to getting everything else done before the next storm comes in. So have to pay some attention to that. It's very important. We just want to talk about some of the different categories here that, and Jim's already mentioned that. Jim, these categories right now for growers pretty open what they want to do?
Yes, in fact, as you see this list, this is not a restrictive list as much as it is an idea. We'll use some of this to help sort data, but we also want people to be very open and think about creative ideas. I like to mention that Illinois State did a treatment where they used compost. Well, I don't know quite where you fit that into. I guess it's a soil fertility issue maybe, but don't think that you're held back by just the list that we see here. However, most people are looking at how does tillage options compare, what about seeding rates and dates, and then the list that you see here. So a lot of different creative ideas. Some people are looking at how can drainage affect this, well, and how can you set up an example that will capture that information, or is there some new products that are very off the wall in terms of how farmers understand them that you'd really like to try to test? I've had people that were involved with the lawn industry or the landscaping industry say, we have some products that we'd really like to find out what happens in the field with them. So don't keep a very open mind on this, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Correct. I mean, we want growers, we want the agronomists to be creative, sit together, do something that they feel will have an impact, something that's fun, and something that interests them. Okay. Even though one of the objectives of this thing is about getting growers to try new things to improve yield and kind of collecting that yield so we can see the gain, there's some other kinds of information we want, right, Jim?
Yes, these are the kind of things that we would like to be able to evaluate and share with people later on. So if we know a little bit about what's going on in that field and what kind of things were done there, it's going to really help us to collect data. And I don't think I need to run through all of this, but you see any specific things there we ought to point out, Dan, in terms of information?
No, we're just trying to, a lot of this information's going to be collected in the first month of just at the whole time of planting, just that whole planting process. What are those plans? It helps us, when we want to interpret some of the data. We have to know what's going on a little bit. So we want to make this as simple as possible, not too burdensome, but to really analyze the data and understand what's happening and the cause and effect. Sometimes you need a little bit more information to just yield. I mean, at the end of the day, growers are largely interested in yield and economic return, but to understand how these technologies work under what conditions, soil conditions, weather conditions, and so forth, it pays to have some other information to help interpret that.
You can also see we tried to make this easy because by using GPS locations, we can overlay a lot of information without asking you about all the soil types. We can get that information from public information databases, and also just the soil testing gives us a lot of data that you don't really have to try to forward to us. We'll just take a lot of that on our own from the samples that you send in, and of course the SCN we think is a very important thing that a lot of farmers would like to get a little better handle on. So when you see a lot of these things listed, not all of them are things you have to actively engage in. Some of them are things we will help pull out of other files.
Now, Gary, when you were working with this last year in some of the data collection, what are some of your tips? How to get it done, what to do, what not to do?
I think what I'm doing this year is that right up front we've had some planning meetings, get the farmers together. We did this the last couple of weeks, and one thing that we would do is just go through the program with them, really establish who is going to do what. And I think that was very important, that communication up front on what's going to be required and who's going to do it. What's going to be required and who's.
That's a very, very important point. I mean, the planning, I think, 50% of the success of the yield challenge probably goes right back to the planning. Everybody communicating, everybody understanding, people understanding what the roles are. Everybody does that kind of communication and planning. I think the rest is not that hard.
That's correct.
Correct. So we're trying to make this as simple as possible. We want to have an electronic database where all this information will go into. We'd like to eventually have workable little entry sheets right on the web where you just go on the internet and then you using some drop-down boxes, you just input some data. But that won't really be functional on the internet this year. And so we're going to be relegated to use a more time-honored tradition of some kind of sheets, worksheets, and to collect that data. Do you want to tell us about these 5 sheets we have in development?
Yeah, you mentioned, Gary mentioned some time ago about some of the difficulties that we had with data, and we had a very robust program, but it was not real friendly to use for a farmer or an agronomist to sit down and input data. We've kind of gone back to an Excel type of format where you can look at that data very easily and see the blanks that you need to fill in. And our intent here is to give you some different snapshots of what's going on different times of the year when we can collect that data. So we start with the first thing we need to do is to know who's on your team, and we have a separate sheet for that. Then we go into what kind of information do we need about the location and what you're going to be planting, and what the dates were and the rate and so on. That'll be a second sheet. A third sheet and a fourth sheet, we've kind of divided up the growth periods into a couple of different stages here. So early growth up to maybe about an R2, you'll collect data on what you observed then and what kind of applications or treatments you've made at that time. And then we kind of like that sheet to come in so we don't wait for everything at the end. And then a second stage is kind of when you go back and look at what do you do at later growth periods when you're really starting to look at some of your grain fill and areas that are pretty critical to that August month of soybean fill. And then a final sheet is harvest and a few questions at the end how that proceeds for you. So the idea is not to give you a lot of sheets as much as it is to break that into nice bite-sized chunks that you can send them to us, and we can allow that way to stay on target ourselves on getting our data put together.
Yeah, these sheets, when we get them posted, probably in about 2 weeks, they'll be posted on the Yieldtown's website, and people can download these Excel files, and they can just open them up on their computer and complete and email them back to NSRL or fax them in. So trying to make this not too hard, but there's still a little bit of time required to complete all these things. But we make the actual amount of numbers you have to input and things you have to write are pretty minimal. We tried to maximize use of drop-down boxes as much as possible.